All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Lee Rector. With nearly 25 years of experience in the supply chain and warehousing industry, Lee has worked with clients and colleagues in 40 countries, focusing on planning, design, and operational efficiencies. Currently, he leads Embassy Data Logistics, where he's pioneering innovation with Warehouse Command, a universal labor planning tool designed to make advanced metrics accessible to operations of all sizes. So, Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa.
So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
Sure. Appreciate it. And thank you for having me on. Over the last 25 years or so, I've been involved in a number of different organizations in the supply chain industry, and we'll call it the manufacturing industry as well, where I've been on the execution level side of the technology. So whether we've been implementing technology, designing technology, or for the most part, designing operations, I've been involved in that with companies around the globe, whether it's been Fortune 100 companies or we'll call it mom and pop family organizations, with the goal always driving efficiencies out of the operation. After being involved in a couple of acquisitions and exit strategies, I decided to build a universal solution as I was getting a little bit disenfranchised with the cost of resources in the technology industry outstripping the value of the actual technology itself. I wanted to create a solution or a series of solutions that were affordable, applicable to virtually any organization on the planet, and didn't require multiples of 5, 6x times the solution cost for the resources to get it implemented. And that's how we came up with Embassy and the current technology that we have, which is our Warehouse Command Labor Cost and Productivity Calculator.
So what are some of the biggest challenges currently facing supply chain and warehousing industry?
I think it runs across the board right now in North America. Labor is a major challenge, whether it's sourcing it or, more importantly, it's having the right labor in the area where you're operating. So shortages are one thing, and we have pockets of shortages in parts of the country. So maybe less educated, we'll call it qualified, skilled trades and skilled people in the South, and not as many bodies in the North or the Midwest. And so what we're seeing across the marketplace, whether again, you're a Fortune 100 company or you're a family run operation, is having the ability to have people stay within your organization. You grow or you size, keeping labor available is a difficult, we'll call it commodity these days. And I think every business owner struggles with having people. And it's probably the key aspect of warehousing and supply chain in particular these days, as making sure that you have the right number of people.
An interesting thing, too, is that especially when we were talking about warehousing in the past, a lot of it was referred to as unskilled labor. But now that we're getting more into technology, into automation, into using AI, those totally unskilled positions seem to be coming less and less in those areas. So what are you seeing as far as the companies upskilling the people that they have and really finding the knowledge and expertise that they need to run those positions?
That's a really interesting point. We've just done a survey for one of the larger warehousing organizations in the North American marketplace. And what we've seen is that from the executive level, having average of over 25 years experience in the industry, going down to the next level of management, having less than 8 years of experience, what we see is this massive gap in knowledge. And with the way the industry is morphed from being, having a 3-day, 4-day window to now people basically ordering something on, say, Amazon, and expecting it to arrive next morning. What's happening is we have to rely on technology to make those decisions faster. And I think there's a sort of a reliance on technology to say that, oh, it's going to be right. And so what we're seeing is people coming out, we'll call them skilled in the technical aspect and understanding technology and what it can do for us, but not really understanding the gap between the operations. And in North America, we have this experience gap. So even if I hire somebody with 5 years of college experience and understanding technology, they need to have 2 or 3 years of experience in warehousing or in supply chain to actually figure it out. The skilled side of things, that's the skilled side. Now I call that level, the management, whether it's floor level management or executive level management. But somebody actually being able to drive a forklift is a different skill. They have to be qualified, certified on it. And that model is actually being dramatically affected by some of these, we'll call it government enforced raises. So what's happening is you can make just as much money driving a forklift as you can serving burgers in some parts of the country. And so why would I spend all the time to get certified to drive a forklift, which is a little bit riskier? You work an 8-10 hour day versus just going and working at a fast food restaurant or something. So there's a gap there. There's a gap with people just coming in to pick boxes, to package and do things. And there's this, again, depending on where you are as markets mature. California is a great example of not having enough people to support the population for the distribution issues that they have there versus, say, Louisiana, right? Which is less populated, less distribution. So they have a better mix there.
Wow, that's interesting. So we're talking about technology. So how are you seeing the warehousing industry evolving, on a global basis? And we're seeing the significant growth in the number of warehouses worldwide. So what is really happening?
The growth of the warehousing industry is it's directly related to the growth of the population. So we need this to support what's going on. Globally, we're seeing shifts in how things are being sourced. Obviously, here in North America, we're definitely looking at Southern sourcing rather than Eastern to Far East sourcing, which means that we'll have a different model in place where things will be sourced through Northern Mexico, where e-commerce will be actually fulfilled out of Northern Mexico as it's much cheaper. Manufacturing will be done here and raw materials will be brought back in. So we'll see a shift in that. We're seeing a shift in, we'll call it home delivery, last mile delivery, as some of the major retailers will exit, we'll call it the national distribution model, where they have a big DC and they then fulfill e-commerce orders out of that DC. And with the onset of last mile and home delivery, they can now do that out of the store. So they don't have the need for a redundant inventory in the warehouse and in the store. So we're going to see that shift over the next 3 to 5 years. Obviously, the biggest change that's going on in the marketplace now is the use of automation, the building of robots, the building of automated solutions. And yet only 2% of all warehouses have actually started employing that automation here in North America, where it's closer to 20% in Europe. And that's really a function of two things: cost of labor and the cost of space. So in North America, we still have some of the cheapest warehousing space on the planet, but we're actually dramatically increasing that year over year. So we don't have that luxury. And within the next 5 years, we'll be outstripped of that. So companies will be looking at automation. AI is a big issue and a big player in that marketplace. And then they'll have the question of assertive AI versus assisted AI. Do we want the AI to make the decision without human intervention? And we'll see how that plays across in the coming years, where we'll have people on the floor with automation on the floor working in the same area. So that will see our change. But at the grassroots of it right now, we are forecasting a labor shortage of over 2 million people in the manufacturing sector. And we're probably forecasting about the same in the warehousing sector over the next 5 years. So that means we'll be short 4 million people. or 4 million workers in these industries. And we're not talking about skilled managerial. We're talking about the people on the floor.
Is there a percentage of those 2 million that could be made up by more automation within the facility? Have you seen some numbers around that as far as closing that gap?
There's still always going to be the issue of automation is scalable only to a certain extent. And depending on the time of the day is when you would maximize your automation. So you have a lot of underutilized time with automation. In production, slightly different because you control your production. And so what happens is most of the people in production are on the support side of things rather than the actual manufacturing process. So we're much more likely to manage people out of the manufacturing process than we are out of the warehousing side of things. The cost of automation is still pretty prohibitive comparative to what we pay people. If I'm looking at adding 5 robots into a warehouse, that's the better part of $750,000. So my ROI on that to replace 8 people is probably 3 years. So it's not going to be as cost effective for organizations to do that. And with the mid-market, we'll call it, again, with the 21,000 or so, we'll call them for hire warehousing companies in the US, the majority of those, again, probably the bottom 95% are not going to have the funds to actually afford that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So with the labor shortage, what are you seeing as far as maybe some creative ways that these companies are using to keep their people? What are they doing from a workplace culture, maybe benefits, maybe flexibility, or even more creative? Because goodness knows we have to be creative these days.
So yes, and creativity is everything. Culture, companies are trying to do things to keep these people engaged, these workers engaged, whether they're giving them a 4-day work week, working 10 or 12-hour days and then 3 days off, or what we call working, let's call it split shifts and things like that, providing them a little bit more benefits, paid lunches, where they have a cafeteria on site where it's subsidized, or in a lot of cases where they actually just get their lunch free. From an operational point of view, it's cheaper to keep people in the building and making them lunch than it is to let them leave. And especially on temporary staff or casual labor, they don't come back. So if you keep them in the building by giving them free lunch, you're doing things on an ongoing basis. Obviously, promotion is very important for people that they don't want to be at the bottom of the pecking order. So giving them actual clear and defined targets where that will be their succession plan inside the organization is very important. You'll see the larger companies doing this, but then again, you don't want to get running into the street gang mentality, which is, oh, he's my friend. He's been here for 10 years and we'll promote him, which a lot of organizations traditionally have done. So people get disenfranchised with that if they see somebody who doesn't work as well, and it doesn't operate in a vacuum. Everybody knows who's working and who's not working in a warehouse. And you see the people that get promoted because they've been there, they're friends with the next guy up. They'll tend to leave. And I don't think that's any different than you'd be in an office environment. But what happens is performance is far more visible in a warehouse or in a production facility than it is in an office.
Right. And it's funny because I know with my programs and clients that talk about the value of peer-to-peer recognition, which really can help in that, because you have those people that they are rock stars when the manager is around and total slackers when they're not. And as you said, the people in the warehouse know who's not working. But if you start giving people the opportunity, the coworkers, to recognize each other, and the people who are doing good work start getting called out, then sometimes those slackers will be like, I want to get in on this too. It builds in an accountability, which is a nice way to do it. Have you seen some interesting types of peer-to-peer recognition?
In fact, I've just done a couple of consulting engagements with companies that want to gamify what they call gamification of the operation. So basically high score, tracking people by metrics on what they're doing on a daily basis, performance levels, and things like that. that's an expensive, we'll call it an expensive venture if you're trying to do that from a labor management side of things and having metrics, but actually measuring what people do on a target rate is much easier. A lot of times the gamification is at the shift level than at the individual level. So having everybody row in the same boat is a lot easier than pitting people against each other. So you want to do it as a team approach. And it's much simpler to do it as a team approach rather than, again, in individual versus individual, because in warehousing, like a lot of places, I'll say, that guy got the good, easy stuff, and I got the hard stuff. He's lifting boxes of chocolates and I'm lifting elevator parts or something like that. You have to have the ability then to take out the white noise, or we'll call it the variability of the operation. Most companies don't have that ability to do that. So what happens is, to level the playing field is where the challenge comes in. How do I get to these metrics so that I can gamify what we're doing? But obviously, a lot of companies have taken to the display operationally, where there's TVs at the end of the line, or there's whiteboards that are saying who was doing well during the day. There's also the quality side of things versus production side. And I think these are things that really motivate people. If they see a benefit to the work that they're doing, is very important. And I think we've seen the change in safety, right? As companies go and post, oh, we've been accident free for 331 days. So people take that personally. And I think it's because they don't want to be the one person who has the accident. So now, because the company's tracking it and they're actually basically posting that, you can go into a lot of facilities, probably half of them, that actually post their accident-free days. So everybody's aware of that. Productivity side of things, less than 1% of companies on the market actually post productivity of their people. They post productivity of the production environment, but not of the people. And so being able to measure that's a very important aspect of where we're going to go next.
Yeah. I think one thing to keep in mind too, it's great to celebrate accident-free days, but I know from teaching a lot of HR law, OSHA doesn't really like that, because what you said, people don't want, they just had 320 days without an accident and something happens and now they're afraid to report it because they don't want to be the one that broke the streak. I think that along with that is really that if you see something, say something, just like at the airport, to make it a safe environment for people to keep themselves and others safe, so that leadership really has this, listen, we want you people to go home safely at night to your families with all your digits in place. That's why we do this.
Yeah. And it's about waste. Companies measure waste. They measure all the things that are great from a sales perspective and from a marketing perspective. But the one that affects the bottom line the most is the productivity of the people.
Absolutely.
And yet they don't measure it. They don't have measures for it. They don't have the ability to figure it out. And so most companies measure productivity against themselves. And what I mean by that is they come in and say, oh, last week we averaged 44 cases an hour per person in our building. This week we did 46. So we're 5% better. We had a great week. Next week we did 50. But again, one week I was picking chocolate bars. The next week I was picking refrigerators. So that productivity level it's a misnomer about how they do that. And that really affects their costs and the fluctuation in costs from an operation. And until they get that, we'll get that baseline of what we should be doing rather than what we've done, mentality out of their business, we're going to still run into this problem that we hire people because we think we need them rather than actually managing out the people, so that we're just not hiring and having people stand around.
Exactly. Well, it sounds like there is a fine line between activity and productivity. So how are you differentiating those two in warehousing? And then how can productivity be measured along the labor costs? We know the issue, but how do we do something about it?
And so 100% activity and productivity are, they're not diametrically opposed, but they actually are non-relational. So Absolutely. There is almost all systems, whether you're a warehouse management system, an MRP, an ERP, they measure activity at either the units level, the order level, the line level. And that's what we call activity. And then they have the other side of things, quality, order fill rate, inventory turn rates, and those are more financial issues. Productivity is based on a certain standard of work over a fixed period of time and this is Warehouse Command and Embassy has really entered the market is we'll call it a calculator, and I'll give some free advertisement out there to Google Maps. So Google Maps is what we call a synergistic calculator. It takes 4 pieces of data, the type of vehicle you're in, the type of road you're on, the distance you're going to travel, and traffic patterns. And it tells you you're going to go from point A to point B, and it might give you 3 options. Take Highway 55, take Highway 75, take Highway 95. And the difference is 45 minutes, 51 minutes, 54 minutes. And you make a management decision based on those small metrics of those 4 pieces of data. What we've done is we've assembled a database of over 800 industrial averaged elements. And so what we use is instead of having 4 elements like Google Maps, we have 800 elements. And what we do is we calculate and calibrate activity at the performance level. So in other words, if you're doing 44 cases an hour, we can tell you that's at 78% of the work standard, or that's at 82% of the work standard. And whether we're off by 1 or 2%, you can make a managerial decision based on that. And we do this for 30 touch points inside the operation, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's warehousing. So by building this, we're giving any company the entry level to measuring productivity. It's not the end game, but it's the beginning game. And so that's what we're trying to educate the market on right now.
And how do you get, when you're implementing a system like that and you have a bunch of warehouse workers saying, oh, they're just trying this as Big Brother spying on me and trying to squeeze more blood out of a turnip and all the other things that you're going to hear anytime you're trying to do a new productivity system. So how are you sharing not only the benefit to the organization, but the benefit to the employees so that you can get the buy-in you need to make it successful?
And this discussion comes up every single day.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The benefit of measuring the performance of an individual in an operation is minimal. Whether somebody's at 95% of the standard or 103% of the standard, for most organizations, it's somewhat irrelevant because they can't just get rid of people that are underperforming because I need them there. And most companies can't discipline people based on a performance level such as that. So it's really not a useful model. So taking it down to the individual level and saying, we're measuring your personal performance, Lisa, has very little value. But looking at my team and saying my team on second shift is at 61% of plan, but my afternoon shift's at 81%, tells me that I have a problem on my floor level management. Or if I go in and look and say, oh, based on this operation, you need 3 people in receiving because there's only enough work or activity for 3 people in receiving, but you have 7, then I know that my people in receiving, I have too many people there.
Okay.
So I don't really look at the individual.
There
So
you
we
go.
take
Okay.
the individual aspect out of it, but longevity wise, it's very difficult to explain this to somebody who's working in the building, that if my company that I'm working for doesn't make money and they continue to lose money, you're not going to have a job. You're going to be out of work.
Right.
So having the right labor staff and understanding what my cost metrics are allows companies to make a small amount of money. I'm not suggesting to make a ton of money. And we're not suggesting that you go out and fire people and get rid of the workers, right? So that's not the Big Brother approach. What the idea is, looking at our coming tide of recession in terms of people, we need to start planning right now to understand that we have to change processes and philosophy on the way operations are run, or we're going to wake up in 2 years and we're going to be short 2 million people. and 2 million, filling 2 million jobs. It's already 5% right now, right? So based on labor stats right now, there's 5% openings because there's not enough people to work in the warehouse. This number will jump up to by 2030 of 2 million. That could be a loss of over $1 trillion in the organizations or in the country. And this is just in the US. So getting your labor plans and understanding a model starts at the beginning. So whether you're a manufacturer of beverage like a beer company or Pepsi or Coke or these beverage companies, they set the standards because they are very production oriented and they control their markets versus somebody that's I got to make 500 shirts or t-shirts or whatever. That is definitely more sporadic from the manufacturing side. And then operationally, every day is different in operations. The orders are different every single day. So how do I plan for that? And what you need to do is get a grasp on that right now. This is the only way that we're going to be successful. And that gap between the executive and the floor level manager, this is going to be a challenge. And giving the new generation of people applications rather than running things on an Excel spreadsheet is the only way that we're going to bridge that gap for the next 5 years.
As we're getting to the end of our time together, you authored a book, Warehousing 101, last year. So what do you believe the next generation of warehouse professionals need to do to elevate the industry to new heights?
They need to learn. And basically they have to learn operationally. I wrote the book, it's on the science of warehousing. It basically looks at everything from planning to design to labor plans and understanding labor. But the biggest gap is the fact that they're coming in, they are far more tech savvy than anybody that's sitting in an executive chair right now. But the problem is technology will just get us to the wrong answer faster if we don't actually understand where we're trying to get to. And I think that this is going to be the challenge with AI. There's the assisted AI, which makes a suggestion, versus the assertive, which makes the decision. And I think the younger generation is under the impression that AI is always right. And it's not. But because we're dealing in hours these days, if you don't find the error in the AI and you're allowing it to make decisions based on the way our order patterns and our supply chain and our production is done, that could be millions of dollars before you find that error. So we don't have the luxury, and the next generation doesn't have the luxury of having 5 days to figure things out, right? The average order time, cycle time right now is under 24 hours, whereas it used to be 5 days. The B2B market is changing dramatically. The next generation is going to be, you're going to order a dishwasher and it's going to come from the store and it'll come that afternoon. Like you'll order it at lunchtime and it's going to show up at 2:00. And that will be the expectation. And if that dishwasher comes to you and it's the wrong one, think of the costs that are associated with making that mistake. And if that happens 10 times, that's going to be dramatically affecting the profit of that organization. It happens every single day today. And we're seeing it now on returns, right? People buy a microwave, they have it shipped, and then they don't like it. So they send it back at the cost of the manufacturer, at the cost of the wholesaler. They not only absorb the cost of reprocessing that product, but they also eat the shipping costs on the way back. And if it was the wrong product on the way out, all the profit that I thought I was going to make, maybe 15%, I'm losing 15% on the way back. So that returns processing is dramatically affecting profit of organizations these days because we got it out the door faster, because the expectation was I ordered it last night, I should have it. But the company that's fulfilling the order is rushing to get things out the door and they just don't have the ability. And systems right now if I have 99% accuracy, that's great. People talk about I have 99% inventory accuracy. That's what I've got in the building. But at 99% order accuracy that's going out of the building, you think that's great. But if I have a client that's doing 5,000 orders a day, that's 50 orders a day that are wrong.
Mhm.
And when you start looking at the large retailers that are doing 100,000 orders a day during Black Friday, and I'm getting just 1% of those wrong, the numbers are astronomical. So I think what we have to do is we need to educate our next generation on the basis, and we'll call it the granular ground level aspects of operations before we let them get in there with tech and drive tech to run everything automatically and sit in their seat and call Alexa or Siri or somebody and order up products and things like that, which is where I think people coming out of university right now are coming out with the idea that technology solves all problems.
Yeah.
And people in operations know that it doesn't. Sometimes it causes more. And until we bridge that gap, we need to make sure that we train the next generation on all the errors that we made in the previous 25 years.
Wow. And I think that also really maybe even sharing the numbers with what that return costs when people understand. Because I think about even when I order things on Amazon, I'll order things, the same thing in 2 or 3 sizes because they're, 2 or 3 colors, because I want the option of having an in-home dressing room and then just return what I want. And how much profit are they losing because of that? I as a consumer, I don't even think about it. So I think that there's probably an education in a warehouse or distribution center, because we have that consumer mentality that, oh, I can just return it. Oh, we can just take it back, where we start to see what those numbers really mean. And I like what you said about 99% accuracy. That 1% is still potentially costing you a lot of money.
What's the difference being a profitable company and being break even?
Yeah.
In our model, and I've just some quick numbers, the warehousing and manufacturing labor industry last year was over 500 billion. If you took 3% of that and just made them 3% more efficient within these operations, which is what we offer our clients, is minimum is 3%. That's $15 billion in labor savings. Now, that's a lot of people, but in 2030, that still leaves us 1 million people short. So what that 3% is going to do is going to reduce our shortfall by half by 2030.
Wow. If people do want to continue the conversation and learn more about how you can help, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Our website is probably the easiest way to go, embassydl.com. And I'm always happy to answer any questions anybody has, and our team. We do a lot in the education market. We actually have on our website Embassy University, which are free blogs to talk about ways to improve your operation without spending capital.
Wonderful. Lee, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.